Hello everybody and welcome to 2021 and happy 20th birthday to RuneScape. I'm JD. I'm joined today by some pretty special guests, I'm going to say. This is a very special live stream today. It's a 2-hour one, so you've got 2 hours of myself if my internet carries itself through this 2-hour period. So we'll be sharing some of the tales of RuneScape gone by with some of our most veteran members of staff, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. Everybody on the screen with me right now. Over the course of the next 2 hours, we're going to have over 60 years worth of RuneScape and Jagex experience coming to you, telling you stories about times gone by and some things that perhaps you didn't know about the game that we all know and love. So if you are wanting to get involved in some of the celebrations, we'll be doing this kind of thing every Wednesday. So we'll be doing some really interesting different streams on Wednesdays from here on in for the rest of January. We've also obviously got the in-game creator event as well that you can jump into, get a little bit nostalgic with some mini quests, and also get a 10% XP buff during your time in the crater as well. And this is part of a month-long party with many surprises in tow, the next of which hitting next week. If you want to find out a little bit more about what's coming in 2021, check out Mod Warden's Christmas message if you haven't done already. It gives you some really interesting and illuminating revelations about what you can expect for this year as well. So if you haven't already, and this is a really good little precursor to some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, we recommend you check out the RuneScape documentary. It was produced a while back now, but it's still really relevant, and some of the stories are still as raw and interesting as they always have been. So give a great insight into life at Jagex and some of the key things that have happened both positively and negatively towards the game over the course of its now 20-year history. Which leads me nicely onto our guests for today. So I'd like to introduce you guys to... So the way this is going to work today is we've got 3 guests who I believe are all kind of a similar vintage of Jagex, and then we've got a second group that are coming later on in the second hour as well. So by way of introduction, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'd like you to tell me a little bit of history about your time at Jagex and also how many years you've been at the company. So I'm going to start with Mod Raven. Let's kick off with you.
Oh, okay. Hello, I'm Mod Raven, as I've been introduced. I've been at Jagex for, I think it's 13 and a half years now. So older than some of our players. I began way back in the olden days in player support. So I was the person granting or denying password requests, never maliciously honest. Then I moved into CM for FunOrb originally, before becoming CM for RuneScape, and then I got hired into content development like 1,000 years ago. And from there I clawed my way up to be a lead content developer, so now I manage other content developers. So yeah, I've been here since the dawn of time. I'm a RuneScape Methuselah.
RuneScape Methuselah. Oh, you should put that on your Twitter bio. I'll move down to Mod Jack next.
Such a Raven way of I think
That's so Raven.
so Raven, I think you started in content development like the week before me or something like that. I think because my first memory of you is you said I just started and you came up behind me and said hi. You introduced me with your real name and you said, "I have a twin brother. That's not me. Don't get us confused." That was like your opening sentence to me. And it turned out you did, in fact, have a twin brother. I thought it was just some sort of elaborate troll, but I eventually worked out you did, in fact, have a twin brother.
It's because people did get confused, despite him working in, at the time, the completely other building. Because, of course, we were in the 2 different buildings at the time.
I got confused once with your brother when Moltaire was leaving. We went down for drinks in the pub, and I saw you and him sitting on the couch, and I said, "Why is Raven dressed like his brother? That's really weird." For some reason, I recognised his sense of clothing style, but I didn't realise it wasn't you. And then I eventually suddenly realised it wasn't you; it was him. Sorry, right? So
You imagine 2 ravens.
It's terrifying. I started Jagex as a content developer just over 10 years ago now, I think. And around the same time Raven became a content developer, and around the same time Moltaire became a content developer. We all started around the same time. And then about 6 months into that, ModMark was getting overloaded with the sheer number of projects that were in development, and they needed more people to review them. So I applied for a designer role. And the initial premise was that we were going to be content developers who also reviewed other content. And I was successful in that application largely, I think, because of my description of how the game Peggle worked. And I've been a designer ever since. My job has changed radically over the years. But yeah, still
we'll come on to that in a little
game
bit.
designer.
Yeah, we'll come on to it, sort of how people's roles have changed. I think there was actually a player question actually that talks about that. But we'll come back to that in a second. We'll park that just to intro Mod Timbo to everybody. Now, same question applies. How long have you been here, Timbo, and what's your journey been?
Yes, hello, I'm Mod Timbo. I've been here 12 and a half years. So in the summer of 2008, I joined Jagex on a placement year. So like I was at university at the time, 2 years into my degree, and they do like a sandwich course where you spend a year inside industry, wherever you're going to. So I was doing computer studies, and Jagex came to my university, and I was like, oh yeah, I used to play RuneScape because back in the day, back in 2003, 2004. So I joined Jagex initially as player support. Within like a month, I moved from there to the RuneScape forum team, as it was known, or the CM team. And at the end of my placement year, Jagex were like, "Hey, do you want to stay?" And I was just like, "Okay." I mean, that sounds a good idea. Like the whole point of me getting a degree was to join a games company like Jagex. So yeah, I quit my degree, which my university weren't happy about. Stayed at Jagex. Was in CM for like another 3 years, I think. Something around those times, like doing the clan cups and all that sort of stuff. That was really cool. And then I joined as a junior balancer to our senior balancer at the time. And then and that role evolved. We talk about that again later. To being a normal balancer, then a senior balancer, then a game designer, then a senior game designer, to where I am now, which is a principal game designer. Yeah, that's me. That's been my role.
I feel like apart from in Mod Jack's case, CM has been a rite of passage for a lot of members of the team, and I feel like I've probably not graduated to other parts of the company. So you can take that as you will.
You've just gone up there rather than differently. So.
That way, yeah. Okay, cool. So let's get into the questions. We've kind of touched on a couple of these things already. I did have a few questions, and guys, if you've got any questions in the chat, we'd love to answer anything that you've got to ask the guys as well. We will be changing up the roster of JMods at about 5 o'clock. We'll be welcoming Mod Mark and Mod Osborne onto the stream, so that's going to be the second half. So if you've got any questions for those guys as well, feel free to chuck them in the chat, and we'll be gathering them and putting them onto our definitely not a script. Yeah, people have already talked a little bit about how some of their roles changed over the course of their time within Jagex, and we'll come into some of the content related questions in a second. But whilst it's kind of fresh in our minds, how have people's roles kind of changed as the company's developed? Because I suppose Jagex, I mean, even 7 years ago when I started, is a very, very different place to where it is now. I can't imagine what perhaps it was like 13 years ago or 10 years ago. So Jack, you were the one that kind of mentioned this to begin with. How has your role kind of changed over the course of the time that you've been at Jagex? What kinds of responsibilities did you have, and what do you have now?
My role is intimately tied into the relationship that we have in the way that our content development team is structured, that we have content developers, and content developers are sort of designers and implementers, and so what exactly the term game designer means has sort of, it's always been about trying to fit around the way that the content team works and helping the content developers to do their jobs primarily. So at times I'm a reviewer, at times I'm a team leader, at times I'm sort of suggesting stuff without any sort of formal responsibility. At the moment I'm doing like training and that sort of thing, and I'm overseeing large groups of projects rather than necessarily working on individual projects, although I happen to be working on an individual project at the moment, but that's largely to help out. So it's just sort of over the years, I've yeah, I'm not gonna say what the project is. Yeah, just sort of jumped between different places as teams have changed. I guess the biggest change in terms of the way you phrased the question about how has RuneScape changed over the years, the biggest change while I've been there has been a change from very much a sort of, sure you remember Raven, the sort of almost auteur-like development of early RuneScape when we were there, when your content developer just got given a project with a fairly vague direction and then just sort of worked on it until it was done and then shipped it. And Mod Mark sort of had a quick look at it to make sure it was okay, and off it went into the game, and we've moved now. There was a gradual transition to where we are now, which is very much more professionally organized team projects led by a producer, multiple developers working together, very high degree of communication, not strict but specific deadlines. We're trying to produce content to fill a schedule, and we're trying to take into account other projects and dependencies and marketing, and so everything has to be much more organized, and there's less of that sort of just do what you like, done when it's done kind of mentality.
Cool. Raven, I expect natural kind of progression to you. Would you kind of agree with that? And is there anything you wanted to add at all?
I mean, I suppose there's also an initial thing which I think is worth mentioning amongst the sort of change from the sort of design way of doing things, which Jack's done, but it's also the way of developing things changed, because the tools to develop have changed, and quite dramatically. One of the big things we've got at the moment is we've got the ability to work on multiple streams at the same time, so people can make their content in isolation and then merge it into the wider thing. So, for example, I can make changes to Lumbridge, but other people working on different projects wouldn't see those changes until we mix them in all together. Whereas in the olden days, we didn't have any of that. We all worked on the exact same thing, on the exact same world, the exact same piece of content. So if I made a change in someone's Lumbridge and they were working in Lumbridge, they'd see my changes, which is important when someone broke something important like login, because of course that stopped everything working for everyone, and this would happen more than a couple of times.
Someone would stand up and look around the team and go, "Who broke login?"
And then also
we will come on to some of those in a second.
Not check it, and then walk away, and not realise they'd broken login, and go off and make themselves a cup of tea. So the rest of us are just going, Good times.
I can definitely picture you doing that, Raven, as well, in that exact voice. Okay, Timbo. Sorry, Raven. You carry on. Timbo, you mentioned about sort of your progression. And it seemed like there's quite a dramatic progression, really, in your role and how it's changed. And I think one of the things that I quite wanted to ask you is how did sort of the CM2 balancer progression go, and what does it mean within Jagex to be a balancer?
So yeah, like being in CM, like I was playing the game a lot when I rejoined Jagex, and you sort of get. You know as much as everyone else, GD, like you get the voice of the player in your head and you sort of understand what the player's going on and that sort of thing. So like, but I was always very design minded, doing computer science, my degree, and like designing games and MUDs and things in the past. So I wanted to try my hand at that for balancing, but because I knew the game so well, because I knew what players were wanting and what they were thinking and stuff, like I was best suited with my design knowledge for sort of balancing job. And the balancing job at the time, at the very, very beginning, was very simple. It was sort of like, how much XP should this D&D give? How much should this item cost on the GE? All that sort of stuff. But like the balancing job evolved into less like day-to-day management of that sort of things, and then a bigger picture initiatives of what should, like, of course they still do the day-to-day things, so like this log gives this much XP and that sort of stuff, but it was much more like working with the developer, making sure that we're getting the right feel of the project and then that sort of stuff. Yeah, like going from CM to balancer does seem like quite a step, but like there's a lot of good things I took from CM, like understanding what the player did, my knowledge of the game, and that sort of thing.
Cool. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about content now. Is there a piece of content that you hold particularly dearly in your hearts, either because you've worked on it or you've been able to, I suppose, see behind the scenes as to what's gone into it, and so you've therefore felt a particular kind of attachment to it? What is your kind of, if you got asked what your favourite piece of content was, what would you say it was over the time that you've been at the company? I'll give you a little kind of second as I'm filling really, really, really well here to think about this, and I'm going to speak really slowly so you have the opportunity to think about it a little bit more before I come to someone in particular. But Jack, you look like you're ready to go, so I'm going to stop talking.
My favorite. I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone, but my favorite quest, which is not one that I wrote, is One Piercing Note, which I think is fantastic. It's a genuine piece of art. I wonder. It occurred to me. I was thinking about this, and it occurred to me that a lot of people probably don't realize you can play One Piercing Note on. Wait, what's it called? What's the actual item called?
Alexa.
The Alexa.
Yeah.
But what's the device called?
The dot.
Thanks, Alexa. The dot. Yeah, whatever the device is. You can actually play One Piercing Note on it. If you ask Alexa to play One Piercing Note, it will. We actually did a port of it to Alexa, which is really cool, and I suspect probably most people don't know that. But all the voice acting, all the music, and everything.
Yeah, I think you have to say play RuneScape. Play RuneScape.
Oh, is it play RuneScape? Right.
Yeah.
We try it now. Alexa, play RuneScape.
We can hear Alexa.
Yeah, there we go. She said, "Welcome back to One Piercing Note."
There we go. Let's say we don't give you
Alexa
live experiences here on the live stream.
One Piercing Note. Unironically, One Piercing Note is like piece of art.
You made everybody.
They just activate everyone else's Alexa. Oh, amazing! It's unironically, I think One Piercing Note is a piece of artwork. It's great. Everyone should play it. Everyone should be exposed to it. It's a fantastic thing. John A. is and was a really gifted writer, and I'm really proud that thing exists in our game. It's fantastic. That's definitely my favorite piece of content.
Awesome. I'll go to you, Timbo, next.
So I guess I have two. One that I did work on and one that I didn't work on. So I guess like my favorite piece of content that I didn't work on was Richard the Murderer. That's probably no surprise to a lot of people. I think the culmination of Lucian's story and the Dragonkin and all that stuff was really, really awesome. There is an honorable mention for the first Zaros quest what Rowley did. I can't remember what the name of it even is. Fate of the Gods.
Fate of the Gods.
Yeah. That was a really great quest for Zaros. And I suppose I should say archaeology for the one that I worked on, because I designed it and it's like the hot new thing. But I think the luck rework was definitely the biggest impact thing that I did during the game jam, which I'm really proud of, and I thought was really, really cool. Like just changing how that works, luck rings, the rare drop table, all that sort of stuff. It's such a long impact on the game that I'm really proud of it.
I think that's great. I think it's not, I suppose, an obvious option, but it's something that is, as you say, has a massive impact on the game. Everybody gets drops, everybody rolls on the rare drop table occasionally and whatnot, and it gives, I think those kinds of things sometimes can be not brushed under the carpet, but perhaps not get the fanfare that other sort of like more quest-based content, say, might do. For instance, it's really important to highlight the work that goes into those as well. So that's, I think, a brilliant example of the kind of thing that I was hoping that people were going to come up with this question. So, Raven, how about you?
I somehow made Blairberry Special a meme as well, which I quite enjoy.
Yes.
Because getting a Blairberry Special is now the absolute epitome of disappointment in RuneScape, which is funny. Yeah.
As well as killing trees.
And killing trees. That's another legacy we can talk about at some point.
Raven, how about you?
I mean, one that I didn't work on, I would probably echo what Jack said with One Piercing Note. I think it's a really good just piece of work. I really enjoy it. The mixture of the sound and the way the story plays out and everything, I think it's brilliant. Something that I've worked on, obviously my quests, but I think I'm probably like Player-Owned Farm, I think, is probably one of my favorite things. Like, it has its problems, sure, but I think getting a system like that into game and having something as weird and wonderful, and plus sneaking Granny Pottington in was I'm very proud of, and I'm quite proud of the fact that her dialogue got in unchanged because it was skirting it.
And Granny also made her way up to the statues in the crater as well, didn't she?
Did she? I didn't remember seeing a statue on the crater, but fantastic. I must have missed that.
Just so I'm clear on that point, Raven, are you saying that we should try to sneak dialogue into the game that amuses us?
No.
Position as a
In my defense, I ran the dialogue past Dave with the caveat of saying, you should read this and be sure, because it definitely said. And the problem is that I was working alongside Maud Rowley, and I think we'd just done the pirate quest. What was it called? Pieces of Hate. So the two of us had snapped slightly and were on similar wavelengths, which is always dangerous. And so that neither the two of us could look at what we'd written dialogue-wise and go, is this a problem? No, it's fine. Which is why I was like, Dave, you've got to okay this. And yeah, it skirts it. I think it skirts it fine, but it does skirt it.
I think okay. You and Rowley are a good influence on each other. I think you and Wilson were a terrible influence on each other, but you and Rowley, I think, work well.
I don't know what you mean. Definitely
we'll talk. Actually, let's talk about stuff that. Yeah, well, I mean, let's maybe go on to kindred spirits another day, but we'll going sort of on the cusp of things that let's say, as you say, on the edge of kind of going into game. Is there anything that you guys have worked on that either hasn't gone into game for specific reasons, or is there any stories that anyone can tell about stuff that almost made the cut or did make the cut that were particularly on the nose?
I've reworked Sheep Herder. There's somewhere there's a reworked Sheep Herder hiding. I think it's before we changed over the file system, so I think it's probably been lost or destroyed now. But yeah, I reworked Sheep Herder so that you had a sheepdog, and you could throw a ball, and the sheepdog would run to where you threw the ball, and then the sheep would move away from the sheepdog as well as you, so you could more accurately steer them by sort of triangulating the sheep. Yeah, that never went in game, unfortunately.
And why not? Sheep Herder is my least favorite.
I don't know. I think it's because I got moved on to. I was halfway through working on it, and I got moved on to Clan Citadels, and it never got prioritized again, so I never went back to it.
It's a shame.
I think that feels like a really good game jam project to me. But anyway, anyone else got any idea?
So there's certainly been bits that we've been stopped at certain stages of putting in. I know. I mean, there's the classics of Dave wouldn't let me kill certain characters. Because I originally tried to kill Hans in, I think it was Kindred Spirits, or it might have been Nomad Elegy. Well, no, it was Kindred Spirits. I originally tried to kill Hans, and like Dave was very, very against that. Which goes, of course, in line with I also tried to torture people, and Dave wouldn't let me do that either. We had a whole scene where we were supposed to torture someone. We had to stop it. I'm not allowed to kill kids. That was fun. Yeah, we got like concept art made of the torture devices and everything. It was great. Everyone else was on board. It wasn't until Dave got that I went, "What is wrong with you?" that we stopped. And that was a prime example of, I suppose, Wilson being a bad influence, because the two of us did not stop that dark train of thought.
I'll tell you what, Dave's got a lot to answer for in the second half of this live stream. He's coming on. I'm already noting down.
He keeps scuppering my project I worked on forever, which was so when I first played RuneScape, one of the very first pieces of content that I loved was Timbo One-Eye cleanup. So I've spent about 6 months designing and developing a reworked Timbo One-Eye cleanup that never made it to game, and I've always been annoyed because Mr. Dave Osborne wouldn't let me put it into game. It had completely new rework. There was daily things you can go and do at Timbo One-Eye. The fence all stayed up at the same time. There was mini bosses. Oh man, that would have been amazing.
Now he's going to get asked about that, and he's going to be like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah. It's all still there. It's supposed to be like a really cool It's supposed to be like a really cool area for low level players to go and skill up. And there was a new type of tree, because of course it was a Timbo related update. So there was the rosewood tree that only grew in the ground. Oh man! In fact, there was actually a Timbo quest that I made as well. That was involving all of the dead trees that have been made into game.
I remember that.
Yeah, I do remember that. Actually.
Yeah, so whenever you chopped down a tree, you had a very low chance to get an amulet of tree speaking that come out of the tree. And you have to try and you can go talk to all the various different types of trees around the world. They all had different personalities, like magic tree, yew tree, all that sort of stuff. And then if you spoke to the dead tree at Yanil, you found out it was like a super special ent or something along those lines, and your task was to go and hunt down Timbo and find him and bring him to justice. And there was a couple of different parts for different trees that he killed. That would have been fun.
Drone patron in the chat says the Timbo Limbo as a potential quest title, which I think works very well. I like it.
Yeah,
I like
nice.
it. Okay, so just looking at, I've just grabbed a few questions from not from the chat, but from Twitter earlier on. So we'll go on to some sort of player questions, and I'll come back to some of the other ones that I've got in a bit. And this kind of goes back, I suppose, to the question that we've just had, really. But do you ever go back? So this is EJ Million. Do you ever go back to your old coding and say, "Holy crap, what was I thinking, and why does it look like this?" If so, which ones? And he's given, or they've given as an example, Apatow and the Rise of the Six as an example. But are there any times where you've come back to either your own or somebody else's coding, where you come back to rework an area or to work on something that requires another system, and you thought, "Oh my god, where do I even start?"
Oh, I've definitely done this. I was recently looking back at from Nick Sagas, and I think I was trying to fix something, I can't remember what it was, and I think I just put a comment to the top that said, "I'm really sorry," because it's not my best work. It's not dreadful. It could be better, but it's not my best work. There's an element, I think another good one is Borrowed Power, if anyone remembers that from my early days of content dev, which someone else has written the code, just filthy borrowed power when it comes to checks, because they hate it so much. So yeah, in my past, I've definitely done some code I've gone, oh no, getting better.
What is it taking?
I'm
13
not
years?
a content developer. Sorry. I'm not a content developer, but when I made Luck Rework, I did it all in Game Jam. So I did it with my very limited scripting knowledge, and it went out and it worked. But I know moderator spent in the ninjas looked at it like later in 2020, and he had a nightmare trying to rewrite all the code that I made. Yeah. Oh God. I feel sorry for him.
There's definitely a lot of hate for some of the older code from people, including me.
I don't have any stories about my own code. I have a story about someone else's code. I won't say who it was, but they're a mod who isn't at Jagex anymore. And does everyone remember? Soon after Dungeoneering was released, there was a rollback because there was some ludicrous exploit, not exploit, but like the amount of runecrafting XP being given out was like 100 times or 10 times higher than it should have been. The reason that happened was because the dev in question, as a coding stylistic point, liked to write incredibly long equations that fit on a single line of code. Like he would put all the variables and embed them into something that was sort of 12 parentheses deep or something ridiculous like that. So none of no named variables, no anything. It was just this dense mess of code, and unsurprisingly, as a result, he put an off by 10 error somewhere in his code, and a crippling RuneScape runecrafting bug. Have we done any rollbacks since then? I can't remember. That was a big deal, that rollback. We've done very few since then. Like where we've actually rolled back player progress.
We try and avoid rollbacks like the plague.
Was the
that's
last
what
one
they're
the
doing one for ages.
coin pouch one?
Yeah, I could probably count on single figures the amount that since I've been at Jagex, and that was 7 years. Timbo, I think you said the coin pouch one. I think was probably the last one that I can remember. But I mean that sounds like a horrible. I mean, I know nothing about coding, and that sounds horrific.
That is not good coding practice. No, that is the wrong way to code. Lay out your variables clearly, label them, give them sensible names. Don't try to write code that looks clever. Write code that is readable.
There's certainly a moment where I've looked back at other people's code. I remember being put on. I'm not going to name the project or the dev, but I remember being put on the project when the dev went on holiday. And I was told to be the person that fixed any bugs or anything. And in that time, I literally fixed one bug, because that entire time I was spent going, what is going on? What's happening? Because it was all just, there was no comments, there was no writing things. It was just like arcane sigils. And oh my God.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Let's go on to another player question. go on to another player question. Here's one that ties nicely into what we were saying about Mr. Osborne earlier. Have you ever, this is by an Avian T, have you ever slipped in a little secret that the higher ups didn't initially or haven't noticed?
The higher ups haven't noticed,
or that is something that went through the system that you kind of slipped in unintentionally, that sort of ended up not perhaps pleasing somebody, or that they that wouldn't have got through had it been reviewed.
I think
the biggest thing
there's things that we would jokingly say we've done, but I don't think they've, because we do take things relatively seriously and we do watch over things properly, so anything major would have been caught. I mean, this includes things like, remember Dead Quest, like all of those we knew about before they went live. We may have rolled our eyes at some of them, but we knew about them enough that it was all right. So there's nothing that's really massively sneaky gone through, at least that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I was thinking more along the fun stuff. There's any fun stuff that's sort of made it through, like if you've managed to get a spare balloon somewhere, or like an Easter egg that's gone in that nobody else has noticed, rather than anything that's going to be nasty.
The biggest thing I remember is that no one knew about Hazelmere's signet ring when that was released. That was complete. No one knew about it. I'm not even sure if it was tested. That's probably why the drop rate was so bad in release. But that was a complete secret that no one knew about. That I managed to slip into the luck rework, which is quite fun.
That's fair. That's
Gower Quest is the obvious one for me, where Gower Quest is just made of nonsense. There's just a thousand references in there, and it's just complete gibberish. Modlino and I worked on Troll Warzone together. We talked about a lot of it in this tutorials actually, but that's just full of nonsense references to in-jokes and things like that. No one notices them because you couldn't possibly. There's a guy who keeps saying, "Where is my grapefruit? Where is my grapefruit?" Because that's one of the only things I know how to say in French.
Okay, there's a few kind of little in-jokes and things.
I'm a native speaker.
There's a few little in-jokes that people sort of knew but never really stopped. Like there's a pig, Jambon the pig, that occasionally you'll see and will electrocute you if you try and talk to it. That was added in during April Fools, and the team accidentally forgot to remove it, and it was a reference to a friend of ours, Mod Jambon. And so we put them in game and accidentally didn't remove them. Oh no! But everyone knew about that, even though it was accidental.
One of the early ones, because one of my very first projects was working with the Dungeoneering team when Dungeoneering had just gone out, and I think it was the first batch of additional Dungeoneering content. It was the first thing I worked on, and for some reason amongst the team, Heim crabs were just this massive in-joke. We thought Heim crabs were hilarious, and just tried to mention Heim crabs at all times. And it was never really a big in-game meme or a meme for the players or anything like that, but we just constantly were talking about Heim crabs, which is why like a bunch of the later content kind of prominently features Heim crabs. Like there's a Christmas one, and is it the Christmas one with the Heim crab fists, or was that one of the sagas? I can't remember. But
that was one of
we just kept putting references to Heim crabs in.
Yeah, we filled the Fox sagas with Heim crabs for the memes, and they were memes that only we got. You're right.
Yeah, they were just like, it was just like we all thought it was hilarious, and the players were just like, I guess Heim crabs are a food that you can eat in Dungeoneering, I suppose. Yeah, I guess that's reasonably relevant. We're all going, Heim crabs, so funny.
But that's like the cabbage thing, isn't it? Because cabbage is obviously the reason why they're as popular as they are within RuneScape, is because the Gower brothers love cabbage, or Andrew loved cabbage, and it's kind of a similar thing, isn't it? If you force it in as much as you can do, if you kind of, then eventually people will love it.
Oh, Mod Mark's in the chat.
That's not where oh no.
Well, Mark will be joining us in about 25 minutes with Mod Osborne. So if you want to chuck in any questions for Mark or for Mod Osborne, then please feel free to chuck them into the chat. We'll grab them as many as we can, and we will ask through over the course of the next hour and a bit. On to another kind of player question for everybody. Chaos Elemental asks, who is a character that you've always wanted to give more content to? I'll go to I'll give Raven a little bit of thinking time, but I'll go to Jack because he's looking confident that he's got a good answer already.
It's Wahisatel, obviously. Obviously, we need a lot more Wahisatel content. We need a Wahisatel quest series. My boy is underrepresented. No, I don't know, actually. It's a sensible answer. I don't know. No, I mean, I like, in all seriousness, I try to think of it in terms of, like, what's a good balance of, like, characters that are important and prominent in RuneScape, characters that players are interested in seeing more of, characters that don't get as much of a look in but should. It's and like, yeah, I don't feel like I have room for, like, this obscure guy should definitely get more screen time because I think it's funny. Like, it's much more about, like, a concrete example. Sorry, I'm taking this question a bit too seriously, but concrete example of that would be when we were picking the companion NPCs for Desperate Times and Desperate Measures, and we settled on Thok and Karos. We spent a lot of time talking about who the best characters to use were, who would be fun, who would play off well against each other, who would be interesting and varied. And it was very much a calculated decision based on what we thought would work well, rather than like, lol, this guy's funny. I wanted to use Migor because I thought Migor would be hilarious, but I was convinced that Karos would work better for what we had in mind, So yeah.
Okay, Timbo, which NPC or character would you like to give more screen time to?
So there's two in my mind. There's the Barrows brothers. I loved the Barrows brothers growing up as a kid playing RuneScape. When they first got released, I did it to death, and I really loved their backstory about how they were these really cool like indestructible warriors in the Saradomin army in the God Wars, and I really wanted to tell their story of them fighting the God Wars and being badass and how they died and all that sort of stuff. The betrayal of Sliske. We never really got much of a chance to do that. And then the other one, which I know Mod Jack knows about, I've written like a plot of like Moya. I love Moya as a character, and she's like this half breed. Is that an offensive term? Half breed Majorat of Lucian and some mysterious human. We don't know who she was and who Moya's mother was. Yeah, I'd love to give her more screen time, more explaining her background and that sort of stuff, rather than the stuff she's doing with Zamorak.
It's like an origin story for Moya.
Yeah.
I quite like the idea of an origin story for Hans, personally. I think that would be a good thing to try and explore. Yeah, I mean, I say I'm not letting Raven do that quest. I tell you, Raven, how about you?
I mean, obvious meme answer of Armadillo, Rite of Passage. It's been delayed 1,000 years now. I suppose I'm similar to Jack in a lot of ways, in which there are I try and pick the character I think will be the most relevant for the story and who the story needs at the time. There are a couple that I'd kind of like to do more with. I have a story and a character in my head for Vengeance from Vengeance Saga. I'd love to use her again. And I'd like to do more with Angoth as well. There's like whole stories there that I'd like to do on Tarthiad with Angoth. But in many ways, I'm like Mod Jack. We pick the character that is right for the story we're trying to tell, which can cause a lot of arguments. I remember the Migor arguments, but
that actually leads on really nicely to another question that was sort of posed earlier, which is from Vengeance123, which is, and we've talked about kind of the process of maybe writing a story, so to speak. How has that changed over the course of the time that you guys have been at Jagex? In terms of writing those stories, writing the characters, writing the dialogue, how has that changed when there's been a lot of change in the world? There's been a lot of change in the gaming industry. What do you do now that perhaps you didn't do beforehand, or vice versa? I'll go to Raven first. Yeah.
So the big one there is talk to each other. Like, I mean, Mod Jack will agree with me. One of the issues that we've encountered with the story is in the olden times, back when we were first starting, people were writing basically their own individual storylines. So Mod John A would be writing, the Zanuck series, whilst Titan would be writing, the Vampire series, and someone else would be writing this series here, but there wasn't really much conversation between them, which meant the world as a whole was kind of a bit weird, which is why we've ended up with things like, King Arthur and Camelot in the middle of it. Whereas now we've got the Lore Council to help bring things together, and that's one of the things we're doing is we're bringing the stories together. We're talking more. We're making sure that things line up. We're trying to make sure that the wider things mesh together, which does mean sometimes some of the older stories get changed a little bit, or even kind of not fully abandoned, but pushed to one side because they're not that strong. But it's the part of it is the problem of, like, particularly in the past, all of the old storylines, to a man, promised something like an entire city would be the result at the end of it, which, as we've established, you can't reasonably do.
Prifdinous.
Not all of them. I mean, that's a good example, but if the effort then is the stuff that need to go into Prifdinous to make it worthwhile, if you imagine that every single storyline has a whole city of Prifdinous, like, it's not going to work. So that's one of the big things we've had, of just meshing everything together and trying to remove some of the over promises from the old stories to make the stories work. And now, there's just much more conversation, there's much more discussion, and everything is more cohesive, which I think is for the better.
Yeah, and we talked about, say, like having the stories being told not just through quests as well, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
Unless I'm incorrect, is a fairly recent thing that we've started to do a little bit more of, which I think kind of makes the world feel a little bit more alive. It means that kind of stories spill out into different areas, which I think is a really interesting and different way to go about doing these things, rather than having them within their self-contained little capsules of a quest. And I personally really like that approach, and I wondered if maybe, as I say, that's one of the changes that we've probably made over the recent history of RuneScape, is to try and incorporate that more into wider content as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Jack, how about you? I've forgotten the original question now, to be perfectly honest with you.
What are the changes in writing for the industry?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. I mean, yes. It's essentially in what Raven said. Like, it was like before. It was almost like there were multiple writers working in the same, like, anthology magazine, kind of like their own little stories all written together. And RuneScape did have a world, but the writers were much more focused on their own content, their own storylines, and the expectation that they would continue to work on their own storylines. And it has been sort of a challenging transition to sort of try to turn it into much more of a coherent, shared setting. I guess, I mean, the sort of the elephant in the room in terms of talking about the games industry changing is just the increased awareness of social issues that's come in. I mean, really, in the time I've been working at Jagex, even, like, there are things that I've learned a lot. There are things I disagree with. There are things I agree with. I've learned more about why I should or shouldn't say certain things, and there are things I wouldn't right now that I would have written 10 years ago. Because of like Timbo asked, like, should I say that? And it's there's a delicate balance for us as writers, because we should we shouldn't be avoiding delicate issues, but we should be treating things with care. That's the prevailing message of I think the modern period, is that issues should be handled, and they should be handled with care, and perhaps we shouldn't do Karamja in the way that Karamja was done. And yeah, that's been so. I think you can see that reflected in a modern content. It's an interesting problem of having a 20-year-old game, that a lot of that old content does still exist in the game, and we have content that we wouldn't necessarily write now. But at the same time, like, constantly erasing and replacing content isn't necessarily something we can or even should do. I'm glad that we have old school, actually, from the perspective of someone working on RuneScape 3. I'm glad that we have old school, because I feel a bit uncomfortable working. One of the uncomfortable things about working on a live game is that when you change something, you delete the old one, and that kind of offends me a little bit as someone who cares about the history of gaming and nostalgia. I don't really like that. So I'm really glad that we have old school. So, like, I feel a little bit bad that I was in part responsible for removing Romeo and Juliet. So I'm kind of glad that Romeo and Juliet exists, if you see what I mean. Like, because it hasn't been lost forever,
Interesting. And Timbo, do you have anything you wanted to add to that at all?
I haven't written many stories in RuneScape, so I don't really have much of an input on that. So
Okay, cool. Well, fine. Then we'll head on. But that's some really interesting insight there, I think, into particularly how things have changed in the modern era versus perhaps when you guys were starting up in your careers at Jagex. That's really interesting. Let's go on to a lighter-hearted question now. Rubik asks, do we have any office prank stories that we can share? Anybody done anything, or anybody been on the receiving end of anything in particular that they would be that's clean enough for a family show?
Oh well, Mod Tomb, who I worked with on mining and smithing, bought himself a label printer and then printed out, have you heard about the mining and smithing rework on little labels, and stuck them to everything I own, and then kept hiding them on everything that I owned for the duration of that project. I just come in every morning and find, have you heard about the mining and smithing rework, labeled onto my keyboard and my monitor and my mouse, and holding my drawers closed. Yeah, that's the most extreme I've had, I think.
I can say I don't remember.
He loves that catchphrase so much.
I don't remember pranks as much. I remember we used to have a point where everyone did the standard office buy Nerf guns, and we had to kind of stop that because people went nuts and really did start, like, work kind of got slowed because basically people just went to war with Nerf. And you find out which Nerf...
Primarily Modmark.
Modmark.
Oh yeah, definitely Modmark. But yeah, I remember the trying to get work done and just seeing like a hail of Nerf bullets flying above your head, and sometimes into your head. Let's be honest, but
they've made their way into many a BTS video. I seem to remember the Nerf guns and an April Fool's video. Timbo, how about you? Any office pranks?
Just the standard, like putting sellotape underneath mouses, and I remember one time because our PCs are back to back sometimes where we sit, we used to swap mouses, so or mice, so like you'd be controlling someone else's PC for a bit and all that sort of stuff. Wrapping things up in like cling film and tin foil. That was Mod Deg, had that done to his desk before. That was all fun.
There's also you have to be very careful when you lock your PCs around Mod Liam. That's another thing.
Oh yeah,
there we go.
He would. I mean, he was like some sort of hawk or sentinel. Like if you stepped away from your PC and left it unlocked for more than a fraction of a second, he was there, and your background was changing to something,
awful,
weird,
awful,
and awful.
Something that no human should have to look at.
It's
not really a prank. It's not really a prank, but it's kind of indicative of the tone of the Jagex office, that every so often we'd look up from our desks and like a horde of staff dressed as goblins would come running past, waving foam swords, going blah, 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 with a camera fast tracking ahead of them or something and you'd look up and you'd go, oh, I guess they're filming another video, and turn back and carry on working, because that kind of thing would happen every couple of days.
I remember filming a video where I was dressed as a penguin and I had to lie on the floor. And the number of people, because of course not everyone was involved, but the number of people that would walk past and just sort of step over me and occasionally stop and go, But no one was that surprised. There was just someone lying on the floor as a penguin. I think it was when we tried to do the big one take all around the office thing that someone did. There was an advert that we did where it was all in one take, and yeah, no one was that surprised.
RuneFest one. I think it was a RuneFest one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember just lying on the floor dressed as a penguin, and no one was that surprised.
I went to the I went to just go in the lift. Our lift door is like a TARDIS. I went to open the lift door. The elevator door opened. Inside there's like one of those giant inflatable T-Rex costumes with someone standing in it. Like, so I just said, all right, fine, I'll get the next one. Doors closed again.
I remember we once, because I generally wrote quite a few of the scripts for live streams in the past, and obviously Moshawny, RIP, used to present some of those, and I remember one where I did try and put as many thocs in there as I possibly could do. And literally there was a point where I just kept on, every single question was about Thoc, and he by the end of it wanted to kill me or cry or do both in equal measure. So that's probably one that I've done.
Johnny was so easy to wind up.
Oh, he was great.
Okay, cool. And we've got about 10 minutes left. Is there anything that you guys wanted to? I'll open the floor to you guys. Is there anything you wanted to share at all? Any fun stories? Any interesting anecdotes? Otherwise, we can go through some more questions. But I wanted to kind of open up the floor to you guys. If there's anything you think the RuneScape community would love to hear about.
Genuinely can't think of anything.
Mine.
The kind of weird thing of like, this is my life. It's not any kind of weird, sort of strange thing. So everything is just blurs into normality.
Oh, there was one where there's. I mean, I think it's. I was chatting to some players. So one of the problems we have in the office is we don't use mod names, right? Like we just call each other by our real names because it would be really weird to call each other by our mod names. And I was chatting to some players. Like I think it was Discord or I think I was in game at the time. I was talking to some players in game, and they said, "Oh, do you know Mod Raven? Not Mod Raven. Do you know Mod Ramen? Mod Ramen's like my favorite mod. Do you know Mod Ramen?" And I'm like, "No, I'm sorry, I don't know who that is." And they're like, "Oh, well, if you see Mod Ramen, please tell him that he's my favorite mod." It turned out I was literally sitting next to him. Like, because we were just both at lunch together, having lunch together, and I was sat there on my PC chatting to players in game, and I had no idea it was him. Like 2 weeks later, I found out that was his mod name, but I hadn't realised the entire time I'd been sitting next to the person they were asking me for.
Because we've got confusing for you because your mod name is not your actual name.
Mod name is not my actual name. Yep.
This is going to be my follow-up question. Like, I know Timbo's I guess it's fairly obvious. Mine is hopefully fairly obvious. But Raven, Jack, how did you get your mod names? I'll go Jack first.
Okay.
When I started, Mod Maz told me, under no circumstances should your mod name be traceable to your real life identity. It's very important to conceal yourself. I took it seriously. I didn't realise that most people's names were just their surname. So I specifically chose a name that wasn't my name. My real name is Tim. Mod Tim was already taken. So I couldn't be Mod Tim. I was going to use my online identity, which is what Maltair did, but I wasn't. I was told specifically not to do that. So I picked Jack, which is my middle name, and the name of my grandfather.
Oh, nice. Raven, how about you?
So I came to Jagex with like a bunch of people. So I used to live up north in Bradford, and there was a few of us that decided we wanted to escape Bradford. And there's an effect in Bradford called the Bradford Bungee, which is if you don't get far enough away, you are dragged back and you'll stay there forever. And so we didn't want to stay there forever. So we went, we were looking for a place and went as far as we could. And all three of us came to, actually there were 4 of us at the time, but all 3 of us came down to Jagex. And the first one was my brother. And he arrived at Jagex a couple of weeks earlier, which is why he got to go to certain parties that I didn't. Grumble. And he chose his mod name, and he picked Mod Crow. So when me and my other friend from the north came down, we decided that we would also go the avian theme. So she went Mod Sparrow, and I went Mod Raven. We were supposed to have another our friend was going to try and be Mod Magpie, but he didn't pass the interview, sadly. So we abandoned him. He was not one of us.
According to your story, he must be in Bradford.
No, he survived because we've kept him down here. It's okay. Got a job down here in Cambridge. We've rented that snap back. It's all fine.
Bungee cord snapped. Okay, cool. Anyone want to share anything else? We've got a couple more questions I can ask otherwise.
Yeah, go for a question.
No? Cool. Okay. So there's a couple of good ones here. What's your favourite thing that's been removed from the game? Jack, you were talking about this earlier with regards to the Romeo and Juliet quest, but is there anything sort of an item or even sort of on the scale of a quest or a landmass or an area that's been removed from the game that you secretly felt, yes, get in there?
We haven't. Well, that I'm happy got removed, or that I'm unhappy got removed. We haven't removed that much. My favourite thing that got. We haven't removed that much overall. Yeah, I mean, I should say I don't particularly like the original Romeo and Juliet quest. It's just that, I don't know. It feels George Lucasy to me, right? It's like it's an existing part of history. People have huge emotional weight to it. I'm really glad people can play it. But no, I don't think there's anything that's been removed that I secretly wish hadn't been removed. I think I'd probably remove a little bit more, with the caveat that I'm glad that it's still accessible through old school.
Anyone want to jump in on that? Anything that has been removed the players are happy about? Trees, Timbo?
They haven't been removed per se. They're just dead now.
Raven,
yeah, I guess the
anything
trees.
Sorry, Raven, you still there?
I was just saying, I've same thing. Certain bugs, maybe. That's it. All I can think of.
Okay. And I'll do one final question for you guys before we'll go to a quick break when we get mods Mark and mod Osborne on to the stream. Community. What we love RuneFest. You guys have all been to many a RuneFest. You've done keynote talks on the stage and whatnot. What's been your favourite community memory? As hopefully a nice little question to finish on. I'll probably ask this to Mark and to Osborne as well. But is there a particular moment that's etched in your memory forever?
Oh yeah, I know that one. It's the first RuneFest. For me, the first RuneFest was extraordinary.
2011 one.
Was it 2011? I don't know. Yeah, I hadn't been at the company
One
that
of the
long,
wine vaults.
but yeah.
No.
So I was a noob at RuneFest, at the first RuneFest, but the company was really worried about it. We'd set up this thing, and we'd organised this convention, but at the last minute, everyone, Andrew, I think in particular, just had a sudden crisis that it just wasn't going to be very fun. That we couldn't put on a good enough show to justify the time and money of the people that had come. We suddenly sort of felt like, and so what we ended up doing, and this is pretty sweet, was we refunded everyone their ticket price. Just because we weren't confident we could put on a good enough show, which turned out to be ridiculous because what we actually did, the people that came loved it and they had a fantastic time and they all wanted to come back next year. And actually the first RuneFest was hugely successful. So it was this weird sort of like, it was so humble that the company was just like, oh, I'm not sure we've done a good enough job. And then it was absolutely fantastic. And it was lovely just meeting players and just see, because I was relatively new to it at the time, and it was amazing just being in this environment of people that loved the game so much and were so happy with what we'd got on with them, coupled with this sort of strange sense of like the company being humble. It was a fantastic experience.
Amazing. Raven, how about you?
I mean, the first RuneFest is probably the same one for me, but it's slightly different memory. I'll probably pick at a different RuneFest. So we do a game at RuneFest where you go around to find JMods and you have to ask them a particular thing. And this is back when I was incredibly stupid, and I had one which was ask Mod Raven what his plan is to take over the world. And I decided to set myself a small challenge of coming up with something different each time. And people really got into it so that I couldn't, and within like literally minutes I'd run out of ideas, but everyone was still kind of there, and some people were offering suggestions that were diabolically bad. But it was great fun again. It was just sort of seeing that sort of spirit of people. That and the group of people that were trying to out evil laugh me at another RuneFest. That was fun.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, just seeing people get into a mad group, it was great. I mean, there were some people that also go, "Oh, I couldn't do an evil laugh. I'm too good." It's like, rubbish. But it just, RuneFest in general. I think just seeing people. See the faces to the the usernames makes a huge difference.
On the Hunt the JMod, I remember when so my kind of role at RuneFest has generally been pull kind of community team together and the live stream and go kind of do all the behind the scenes stuff that people see outside of the venue. And I put myself on the Find a JMod list one year, and I was stuck behind the production desks pretty much for most of the day. And desperately needed the loo. And I kind of went out from my confines of the production area, and it took me 3/4 of an hour, I think, to get to the.
You've got
my list. But that was a mistake on my part. But it was lovely to meet so many people, even if I did nearly wet myself at RuneFest. So that would have been a story to tell everybody. But that's kind of. I've got other ones, but I'll probably talk about those in the next hour. Timbo, how about you?
Again, RuneFest related, but more like the night before. So like the night before was this community fun idea where they would meet up in London, specifically Namco, the night before, And I knew a bunch of the players who were organising it, so I'd always try and attend them before RuneFest, and it was just so much fun, just sort of like having these informal chats where people would just come up. I mean, to be honest, it's quite nice to be a celebrity a little bit. I'm sure these guys will appreciate that as well. Like people just sort of walk up to you and you're like, "Oh my god, it's Mod Timbo," or they say, "Hey, Mod Timbo, why are you so bad at this?" or whatever. Like very copy. But like it was just really nice, just like you're just standing there like having a drink, or a soft drink, I should note, not a hard drink. And like people would just come up to you and you have these informal chats, or you walk into a group of people and they say, "Yeah, Timbo," and like it's just really, really cool to see that. And then you're just talking about RuneScape, very informal, very casual chats. And I always remember that, and like smashing dodges into people and into players and stuff. It was really fun. Yeah, that was a really good moment.
Amazing. Okay, guys. Well, we've gone a little bit over, but it's been a pleasure speaking to all of you today. Thanks very much for joining me, sharing some of your memories and some of the exciting things that you've been up to in the last, combined over 30-something years of RuneScape history. We're going to take a quick break. So we'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes' time, and we'll be back with Mods Osborne and Mod Mark. So make sure you tune in for that. We'll be asking some more questions. Get them into the chat whilst we're away. We can't wait to see you after the end of this, I'd say, short message break. We've got no messages. It's just going to be a short break. Thanks very much, Raven. Thanks, Mod Jack. Thanks very much, Mod Timbo.
Cheers.
Hello and welcome back to the Stories by the Fireside live stream. I'm JD. I did just pop to Lou and it didn't take me 45 minutes. Everyone will be pleased to know. Welcome back. I'm joined by two stalwarts of the RuneScape franchise, I'm going to say. I'm going to give them a little bit of a grand welcome. You guys probably don't need any introduction, but I'm going to ask you to give the community one anyway. Just tell me a little bit about your time at Jagex, your time working on RuneScape, how many years you've been here, and some of the fun things that you've been up to. I'll start with you. Let's go with Mod Mark.
Hello, I'm Mod Mark. I am currently a creative director at Jagex. I started in 2003 as a member of customer support. And when I joined, we'd just done an update called the Gnome Ball. The Gnome Ball content had just been added to the game, and I think, I spent about 6 months in customer support. That got moved on to QA, and then after a few conversations about design practices and documentation and a very drunken weekend at Euro Disney, I was given the opportunity to be in charge of the content team, and then made lead designer, and then a design director, and next month is my 18-year anniversary.
18 years, wow. That's a long stint, that is. Lots of stories to tell, I'm sure.
Many stories.
Let's move on.
Many of which stories I can't remember.
And Mod Osborne, let's go over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your time here at Jagex, and something that people might not know about you.
Oh my, okay, all right. So this year will be my 15th year. I'm known as the face of Jagex because of the sheer circumference of my face. We have actually tested out with kind of a little tape measure that came in a Christmas cracker all around the head, and I did actually have the biggest head in the office, which was disappointing. But yeah, I've been here for a long time. I arrived the week after Falador Massacre, so I was kind of birthed by the Falador Massacre. And then I arrived. Immediately Mod Mark was an old timer when I arrived. He had been there for like 5 years or whatever it was. So it feels weird to be sat here being a stalwart, emphasis on wart, with him. So I started off doing quest helps in the web content team, running around doing polls and things like that. And then I kept on beating on Mod Mark's door, throwing concepts at him and designs at him until he interviewed me, and I had what he called the worst interview he's ever had with me for a narrative designer. It was terrible, but I'd shown enough promise in other things that he'd let me go at which was my first design job. I then failed at that too, but ever since then it's been a gradual incline, and eventually got to lead designer somehow. Somebody rolled a dice and
your guys' ears were burning in the previous hour just a couple of times because things that we were talking about, things that perhaps hadn't got into game or things that hadn't quite passed through the quality bar, let's speak. And there was a few mentions of your names as being the reasons why certain things didn't get in, which hope. So you might get a few tweets to you just say why did this not get into game? Why did this not get into game? But I'll let the community do that one for me.
Maybe we should use our hour, Dave, to talk about all the things that did get into the game because of us. That would be a positive. Right?
Where we've used our clout to get in things that really shouldn't have got in the game.
Exactly.
Well, on that, is there anything just to kick things off on a slightly light-hearted note? What do you, in terms of the content that has made it into game that maybe you think, looking back, maybe not? Is there anything that you think actually I would quite happily get rid of right now that went in maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago that perhaps isn't quite fit for purpose now?
Hunting.
Ooh.
The hunting skill. The entire hunting skill. That was a dark time. I just didn't agree. I didn't agree with the design ambitions for that piece of content, and perhaps I didn't get as involved with that piece of content as I did with everything else that was being made at the time. I think that would be a fair thing to say.
Okay. Osborne, can you beat that?
My word, an entire skill. I've been involved in so many quests that I think are just kind of on the line, I guess. I keep on reeling out like kind of Slug Menace and things like that. But I'm going to go for one that I'm going to pivot the question a little bit, in that there was one piece of content that I thought we shouldn't have made and I got completely proved wrong. So I'm not answering your right question, but like Elite Dungeons was like thrown in front of me as lead designer. We were in a kind of period of we wanted to put more power into the hands of developers, wanted to show what they can make. And I just wasn't convinced by the concept at all. I didn't think we needed it. You know, we had bosses who were interested in solo bossing, and story players who are interested in quests, and never the twain shall meet. You know, the idea of getting them both together to do a piece of content together, I just didn't think would work. And it was really nice to actually be proven kind of wrong with that. Lots of people still play Elite Dungeons, love Elite Dungeons. The stories we got out of it are cracking as well. So if I had my way, that wouldn't be in the game. I got bullied into it. But it's nice to be proven wrong occasionally.
You know, we were talking about terrible interviews, Dave. I feel like that's that might have come up in the worst interview question, maybe.
Oh, I don't want to go into that interview. I'm getting kind of flashbacks, getting whiplash from it. I was talking about how
Mark,
I make people cry. Why would you say that in an interview?
Amazing. Mark, how about you?
I mean, it's really interesting hearing the lads talk in the previous hour. There was lots of content. I was amused when Timbo started talking about Type 10 Trio, for example, and the kind of content. Like so many of our ambitions in the early days, we were trying to do things that the engine was just simply not capable of doing. And because of the rapid development that we went through, you know, I mean, we're releasing 4 pieces of content every month. You know, like the content treadmill was ridiculous, the speed in which we were going. And sometimes someone would go to the engine team or to Andrew with a request for some new command or something like that we wanted to play around with, and he would say, no, you can't do that. And at that point it would be like, well, then the entire piece of content that we want to do isn't going to work. So we're going to have to come up with some other clever way of doing things. I think these days you would have established much earlier on whether or not you could have made that piece of content before you started making it, because, you know, like, but in those days that's not how it worked. So there's so many things that, like whether it's like big chompy bird hunting or Type 10 cleanup with defense construction, or some of the early things we tried to do with even things like dwarf cannons. We were doing things that the game just wasn't designed to do, and we kind of, you know, hacked or abused some system and repurposed it in a way that it wasn't supposed to be doing it. Andrew would like come along 2 months afterwards and go, why is the code doing this? It shouldn't be doing this. Like, that is not why you built that. You can't do that. And we would say, it's live. It's been live in the game for 3 months. Like what? So there's just so much content like that where our design ambitions weren't matched by the technology, but somehow we managed to do it. We were too far into the project to stop, and we made the best we could of a bad situation. And yeah, I would love to go back and go, do you know what? Right, really think about this decision, because it's going to make a big impact on the game, and it's going to be really, really difficult to undo in 10 years' time, 15, 20 years' time. I'd be really interested to think, whether in 20 years' time from today, there are design decisions we've made just now, or last year, for example, with archaeology or something like that, where you know, those things come to bite us in the arse in the same way that like dwarf multicams have done several times over the last sort of 15 years.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to take a slightly swerved path now, and I'm going to sort of latch on to the fact that, Mod Osborne, you said that you started the week after the Falador massacre, because we did get a few questions about this, and I wanted to drill into it in a little bit more detail. So let me see who wrote that question. Frozen Dawn LOL asked, what was it like in the office around the time of the Falador massacre? I know Modash isn't on this stream because he does a great bit in the documentary about what that was like, but I'm not perhaps talking about the actual the sort of the evening itself, or even sort of the immediate aftermath. But was there anything that kind of changed about how we did things?
Go on, Mark.
Maybe touched
there.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I mean, my overwhelming memory of the Falador massacre is how calm John Ailiff was during it all, because it was his code. It was some player-owned housing code that he'd written that kind of went a bit crazy. But he was kind of like, "Look, I don't understand why this is doing this. I should let other people who understand this better than I do work it out." And basically it was Ash and Andrew kind of sorted it all out. But at the time, yeah, it was just... It all happened so quickly. You know, it's a massive moment in our history, but actually we're talking about like 2 or 3 hours in 18 years of my history in the company. So it's a tiny, tiny, tiny little blip. And actually what happened during that time, I can't remember a thing apart from how calm John was. Honestly.
And Dave, coming into Jagex the week afterwards, was there any kind of, I suppose, having a frame of reference is different in that difficult in that kind of situation, but did you kind of get the vibe that there was something that was up? Or that had been up?
Well, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, a little bit, because like the team I was working for had been working on the news posts and the communications just a week before about, like kind of letting people know this won't happen again, sorry, and all of this a lot. So there was a little bit there, but I remember the mood amongst developers was a little bit different, because suddenly I think there was a realization from the devs that you could be the face of a massive, kind of blip in RuneScape's history. And there was certainly a lot of, back in the day, I don't know if you agree, Mark, there was, you were the update. Like, there was one single developer per update.
Yeah.
And like, there's nobody to hide behind. It's not as if like you had 2 or 3 devs per project, you had a big QA team, you had a producer, product owner, and all this. Like, you were working as a team. It was kind of like you out on your lonesome. That's really scary. So credit to John, who, to be honest, was always a cool cucumber anyway. Whenever I worked with him, it was always my problem. It was my fault, not his. So he was well equipped to handle that situation, I think.
Cool. Well, I'll park the Falador massacre because, as we've highlighted before, perhaps it wasn't our finest moment, but it's lived on in the memories of plenty of players over the course of the last 20 years. And we'll talk about questing, because I know questing is something that is obviously close to both of your guys' hearts. What is your favourite, and I suppose on the flip side, least favourite quest, and why? And that can be from a playability perspective, that can be from a behind the scenes to get to the point of the release perspective. Who wants to go first on that one?
Go on, Dave.
All right, Dave.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if we're doing a hands up thing. I mean, I keep saying it every time I'm asked. That's it. When I'm asked, I generally say one pissing note, and I still think it's true. I just think it is the most complete quest that we've done. There's a kind of complete in the sense that it feels, visually very good. Even now, I'll still go back to that kind of area, and it feels immersive. I just go in there and I've just got this area all to myself. But then we did the music with Valerio. We're working with Mod Lord for the very first time, I think. Our head of audio had just about joined, and he was pushing us to make sure audio was at the center of a lot of our questing. And he just kind of decided that this is going to show off. And so we started putting together playlists of what would it be like if you brought Spanish guitar with choir singing together. And I made a playlist for Mod John A, actually. I remember this. So I got the soundtrack from In the Name of the Rose and various other things, and Gogol Bordello was on there as well, and things like that, just to try to get him in the mood for the quest. And he just went and made it. And I remember getting the script and the design back, and I was known for putting red marks on everything, doing lists of bullet points, and I had 2 things to change. It was kind of like, and I was just kind of making things up for the hell of it. It was kind of like, well, do you think the cabbage should be a potato? This kind of thing. You just couldn't improve it. And so Mod John A just knocked it out of the park, and I still love that. It's my example quest.
Amazing. I'm just going to quickly interrupt because when you said head of audio, do you mean Mod Lord?
Yes.
Yes, Mod Lord. Sorry, who did I say?
So, no, you didn't at all. But interesting fact about Mod Lord, he put it on his Twitter account actually a couple of days ago. His daughter was born on the same day that RuneScape was launched, which I thought was an amazing fact. And if you want to find out for yourself, you can go on his Twitter account, which is Jagex Lord, I believe. But yeah, his daughter was born on the same day that RuneScape was launched, which was amazing.
She's
anyway.
called Seasha.
Sea Shanty Lord, yes. Mod Mark, how about you? What's your favourite quest and least favourite? Oh, we're going to least in a second, actually. My most favourite quest.
It changes all the time. There's so many pieces of content which I feel like personally connected to. There's quests that I love because of the role I played as a lead designer. For example, Ash's quests, like the troll quests, the My Arm quests, Carnelian Rising. Like Ash is a fantastic developer, but at the time he was someone that really needed a lot of encouragement, like someone who needed more self-confidence in terms of the value of his content. He never thought he was good enough to actually make stuff, particularly narrative content, and I feel incredibly proud because it's fantastic. It's really good content. The fact that the Wise Old Man is one of our most popular characters, he created that character. The moment that I had at the first RuneFest where I sat Ash down with a classically trained Shakespearean actor, and the two of them talked about the core motivations for the Wise Old Man, because that guy was doing acting as the Wise Old Man at RuneFest. Like, that whole bubble of thing, like, it would never have happened if I hadn't have just kept dragging Ash and going, come on, you can do this. This is really good. Like, I feel incredibly proud of that. But as a player, like, it's not the content that I love the most as a player. As a player, my favourite quest is Clockwork Syringe. The pirate storyline is magnificent. The characterization in that storyline, the kind of nods to the real world pirate mythology, the way that it integrated with in-game lore, all the asides to camera, the two developers that were responsible for the majority of the pirate content and how they got their personalities within that content. As a player, definitely Clockwork Syringe. As a lead designer, probably My Arm's Big Adventure. And as a design director, this is going to sound really weird, but it was the first Desert Quests. They're awful. They're not great pieces of content. But what we were trying to do at the time was the boys were talking about it in the last hour, was all content developers were very segmented. They were separate, and there was a kind of lack of cohesion when we looked at how we launched content, when content came out, how content supported each other, how developers supported each other. And the desert content, I think it was like April 2005 or something like that, where I'd said, right, I want to have a month which is all of a similar theme, which has ongoing principles that exist within lots of different pieces of content. And at the time, the studio just weren't orientated in that way. And so actually getting a month worth of content that all kind of spoke to each other was something I was very proud of from a directorial perspective. So there you go. That's my long answer. I'll try and keep them shorter, I promise, JD.
No, by all means, keep going. It means that I don't have to talk as much, which is always pleasant for everybody, I suppose. That's some really that's some really interesting insight there. I think, particularly when I think that there are obviously really there are some crowd pleasers that we've released over the time that RuneScape's been alive, particularly in the questing side of things. It's really interesting to see from a developer's point of view what are the I suppose the ones that they're most proud of, and they can be for very different reasons than, say, a player might enjoy the quest, which is great. And we had, I think, of the 5 people that we've asked this question to in this stream, we've had 3 votes for One Piercing Note. So if you've not played it yet, I very much recommend you do play it, as well as all the other ones that have been mentioned so far, and definitely turn your audio up, because again, one of the kind of unwritten rules of RuneScape is that the audio is fantastic, and you better turn that audio up, because it's great, and there's a reason why we've released soundtracks and things like that. And I would thoroughly encourage anybody who doesn't play with sound turned up to really do, to get that whole immersive experience, that kind of whole MMO feel. That's my little. I'll get off my soapbox now and get on with the questions.
Just one thing, JD.
Yeah, go for it.
The reason why One Piercing Note exists is because we wanted more reasons for players to turn their sound on. It was that simple. The boys talked about the very light guidance that we made in the early days about why a piece of content should exist. And these days there are all sorts of business cases and this and that and planning and all sorts of things. And when One Piercing Note came out, it was simply get people to turn their audio on. It was that simple. We wanted a low-level piece of content that anyone could access in a really accessible place, and we wanted it to be the reason why people turned their audio on. And my stretch goal was, it would be great if there was something that encouraged them to keep their audio on afterwards. We wanted them to accidentally allow themselves to be fully immersed in the world. And the content that came out of the end of it, thanks to John Aliff and Dave, you shouldn't downsize your role in that content. Like there were lots of people who were very much involved in that. It was, without John, it wouldn't have happened. But and the fact that it exists as an Alexa piece of content now is fantastic. And I feel honoured that I was the one that was kind of responsible for making that project happen. It was all the reason for it to exist was, let's get people to turn their audio on, and look at what came out of the end of it. Like sometimes you just need a great developer.
Yeah, we had a spate of really good quests for audio, I think, in that kind of period of time. We had Song from the Depths as well, sort of within that era, which is also great for audio. We did that in the Steam launch stream. I still can't say that phrase, and I said it about 10 times in the actual stream itself. But yeah, we did that, and the audio on that was fantastic as well. So yeah, turn your audio up, everybody. Okay, there's an interesting question from that guy 5477, and we know RuneFest is a kind of a time where people can meet their favorite JMods and whatnot, but have you guys ever been recognized outside of sort of Jagex based events? And have you ever, what's the most surreal experience that you've had if you have been recognized outside of those scenarios? That's a question from that guy 5477. Mark, I expect you've probably been recognised outside of RuneFest.
Huge amounts. In fact, one of the early RuneFest, me and Dave were walking down the road, and there was someone on the other side of the road who shouted out, "Hey, hello, see you at RuneFest," or something like that. And I think, Dave, you said that's the first time that's ever happened to me. And it was like the day before a RuneFest or something like that, wasn't it? And we were just like walking down the road. I think it was Billingsgate 1. Is that right?
Yeah. Basically, it was kind of. Yeah, I'll let you talk. But it took me far too long, and I've still only been recognised a couple of times. Something about my face.
I think it was the behind-the-scenes videos, to be honest with you, because a lot of people, that's the video that they watched. Like, what's the content that's coming out next month? Even those people that weren't really playing RuneScape at the time, they were still watching behind-the-scenes videos, because so many people were still thinking about, like, I'm going to play RuneScape this month because this is coming out, or something like that. They were much more kind of drop in and drop out than we tend to see these days. But so because I was the face on the behind the scenes videos, I got spotted all the time, and it still happens now. Even though I don't really appear on RuneScape videos anymore, people still seem to recognize my face. It happened like sort of around Halloween last year was the last time I got spotted. But the most surreal time it happened was when I was at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So I went up to Scotland. My sister lives in Scotland, so we went up and we met at Edinburgh. Then we met at Glasgow Station, and I was with my girlfriend, my now wife, and my sister's husband was with us as well. And I was at the train station waiting for them to turn up, and this guy appeared, and he's like, "Oh my god, it's Mod Mark. What are you doing here?" And I said, I'm on my way to Edinburgh to go and watch the Fringe. And he said, "Can I ride in the train with you? Because I've got all these questions I want to ask you." And I was like, "Now, that's not going to work for me, mate, because I haven't seen my sister for months and I've just got here." So we all kind of sat near each other, but he sat like a few seats away, and he was just kind of desperately trying to listen to everything that we were talking about. And it was a bit weird. And I said to my sister, "That guy, he's a RuneScape fan." And she's like, "What are you talking about? That's balls. Like that's not what's happened." And then in the following 3 days at Edinburgh Fringe Festival, I got spotted about 15 or 20 times. The biggest one being I was in a bar after a gig by this comedian called Nick Helm, who is one of my favourite comedians. He's in a TV show called Uncle, which I would recommend to everybody. Absolutely fantastic TV. But he's a really good stand-up comedian. He was quite early on in his career, and he was doing a signing in the bar afterwards. And so I went into the bar because I wanted him to sign something for me. And there was this little queue of people queuing for him. And then I joined the back of the queue. And then some people joined the queue to get me to sign something. So there was kind of like 2 queues. There was like him and the people that had just seen his gig, and then me with a bunch of RuneScapers who were trying to get me to sign something. And I'm like, I didn't want this to happen. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Oh, sorry, excuse my language. He's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, get out of my face." It was very funny. I bought him a beer. I saw him a couple of years ago and he didn't remember it, so I feel like I'm grateful that I didn't mar his like early Edinburgh Fringe experiences. Yeah, there
it's
you go.
fine. If anybody's ever watched a Game Blast stream on our channel, you'll know that the amount of times that we can drop an F-bomb in the course of a 24-hour live stream is quite a significant amount. So don't be too surprised. But apologies for any people who are offended by the language. You're on Twitch, so you probably won't be. Osborne, how about you? Any weird, surreal experiences?
I think I've got to accept that maybe I'm not much of a celebrity. I'm like the Z list of the Z list. It's only happened twice, really, outside of a kind of RuneScape scenario. And I remember the first time I was in a barber's, had the whole thing over the top, was getting my hair cut at the time, and I could just see this face like flickering, like looking over. "Oh my god, who's it? And then brought his girlfriend over. "Oh my god, look who it is!" And I was getting excited. It was like, yes, it's going to be my first time. And they finally plucked up the courage to open the door, and they went, "It's Mod Kelpie!" And I was like, "No!" So, like, I just screamed no at the top of my voice, and they must have wondered. I'd say, come on in. "No, I'm Mod Osborne." And so we had a good old chat, and that was lovely. But the second and only time that I've been noticed outside of RuneScape context, I was in a boot fair, and I went to somebody's stall, and they said, "Oh, it's Mod Osborne, can I shake your hand?" I looked down at all of his stuff, and was like, "Actually, you know what? I want this." So he had a NES game. It's like, "Oh, an old Nintendo game." Asked him for the price, and he charged me what was on the label on the front. I didn't realise there was a label. I was just like, "Oh, I have no pull whatsoever." So those are my 2 stories. So if anybody spots me, can you please come and talk to me?
I can't believe that you got mistaken for somebody else who works at Jagex. Of all of the chances that you could have had, like how does that happen?
I mean, we were both on live streams. We were both hosting at the time, I think. So it was both of us, and I think just kind of maybe we got the faceplates the wrong way round, or they just got something jumbled up in their memory. But it used to be the Kelpie and Osborne show.
Oh, that was a question from that guy 5477. Thank you very much for that question, because that's probably one of the more entertaining ones I think we've had over the course of the 2 hours. So thanks very much. Let's talk about while we're on the subject of players, let's talk about RuneFest. Talk about a little more detail and kind of some of the perhaps behind the scenes stories that players might not know about about what goes on at RuneFest. Obviously, again, keep it as alcohol free and as we can do. But I know we might be struggling. But is there anything from a RuneFest perspective that you can remember or that is suitable for this kind of event that we could talk about that players would find interesting?
That doesn't involve alcohol.
I mean, not copious amounts, let's say.
Well, okay. I mean, that like RuneFest is an amazing experience for all of us. Like, I've always said, there is a notable difference in emotions in the office after a RuneFest. Like, there is nothing more powerful in the year to make developers work harder than RuneFest. And the crazy thing is that we are absolutely exhausted by the time we get to RuneFest, because people don't take... It's really only been the last one RuneFest where some developers actually didn't have normal work for 2 weeks just so they could do everything they needed to do for RuneFest. But most years, and Dave, I'm sure will back me up here, the amount of work we generate for ourselves, and we don't give ourselves any time to do it, it's a labor of love. And so when you get to the event, you are physically exhausted because you've basically been doing 12, 14-hour days for the last 2 weeks. But the adrenaline rush of RuneFest is enough to keep you going. I think I've only actually slept twice in all the RuneFests I've ever done, because the adrenaline is just like keeping me going, keeping me charged, or it's like 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm going through my script again, or whatever. It's an incredibly powerful thing, and then the feeling that you get afterwards, you can picture the face of the people that you're making content for. You value every single person that's come up to you to shake your hand. It is a massive thing. So we always talk about what it means to the players, but to us as developers, as members of Jagex, as these very lucky custodians of Gielinor, it's an amazing thing. And like, I just want to talk more about that. The fact that we get so much out of it as a team, and we always talk as lead designers, right? Dave and I will often describe that we like add 5% to a piece of content or something like that, right? That most of the work is done by somebody else, but we get to add a little bit of cream on the top, right? With the things that we get involved with. RuneFest has the same impact. Like, it adds another 5% of quality to the things that we do, and I just don't think that people appreciate how much we appreciate the players that go there every year and the difference that it makes to us. From a personal perspective, there are people that I look forward to meeting every single year, and I have no idea what their name is. I know their in-character name. I probably know what level, when they got their 99 Slayer. I probably know that they're the player that came up with some random idea to do with an April Fool's joke or something like that. But I don't know who they are. I don't know where they live. I don't know anything about them. Only know their Gielinor persona, and the person I meet at RuneFest is an interpretation of that avatar. It's not the other way around. Normally in MMOs, the character you play is an extension of yourself, but at RuneFest, the people we meet are an extension of their avatar, and that is the weirdest feeling. I've done live action roleplay for a long time, and you have a similar kind of relationship with the characters that you meet in a field. Or I've done theatre for a long time, and there are a lot of people that I associate with the character name that I played, against them on stage. But at RuneFest, it's like 2 days of intense relationship with an avatar in real life, and that is the weirdest thing. And that is that. There's no other experiences in my life which are quite like that. And yeah, the most painful thing for me last year was, well, not last year, but yeah, it's always painful when we don't do a RuneFest. And there are always very good reasons why we don't, but I miss that. I miss they're genuinely friends, and I feel honoured that I get to be friends with so many people through a platform like RuneScape.
Yeah,
I've done
some
it
of
again. I've
my-
talked too long. I'll shut up.
I was going to say some of my personal favourite experiences since I've been at the company are RuneFests, Game Blasts, those kinds of big events where everybody pulls together. And you, Mark, you talked about kind of how everybody sort of puts that extra 5% in. For me, also, it's like the actual. There's a lot of people that we get to work with on a day-to-day basis. So I would work a lot with the community management team. I work with a lot with the development team and whatnot. But everybody from Jagex goes to RuneFest. About 2/3 of the entire company go to RuneFest. So you end up working with people that you never worked with before. You build up camaraderie with people that you'd never normally have the opportunity to do very much with. And I think that's really, really amazing, on top of being able to meet the incredible people that play our games and the variety and the amazing diversity that we have. People who play RuneScape, and that's always a massive kind of eye-opener for me, and it also makes everybody kind of goes home and thinks, well, actually, this is why I do my job, this is why we do what we do, and that is such an amazing thing to be able to come back to people and or to be able to do, not just for the company, but also for obviously for our players as well. It's a great opportunity for them to meet up with each other and forge amazing friendships they'd only ever really had online. It's a brilliant thing to do, and I second your sentiments, Mark, on when we aren't able to do a RuneFest for whatever reason. It really is it's heartbreaking, I think, for everybody within Jagex. I realise I completely missed you out, Dave. What is your kind of RuneFest memory that you want to try and add to that?
To be honest, like Mod Mark just covered so much of it. I would be as brutal as saying that I hate RuneFest for a month, and then I absolutely adore it for a day, possibly two, depending on whether or not it was a 2-dayer. Because Mark's absolutely right. So much legwork is done while we're trying to make a game in the month or so before it, with all the rehearsals and putting things together and desperately trying to pin down a release schedule and things like that. But man, the buzz probably lasts a good 2 months afterwards, so the investment is so worth it. And you're right, absolutely, as well, Mod Mike. I feel so bad that I don't remember the names of people. I even get given like kind of bundles of things. I've been given screenplays. I've been given so many ideas and quest designs and love triangles with Saradome and Zamorak and Zaros. You know, I've had them all, and I get them at the end of the day. I put them in my bag, and I get home and I think, I don't know who gave me this. How do I get in touch with this person? But I love it so much. I think there are some headline RuneFests. The first one really sticks in my memory because I remember, obviously, it was after the removal of trade and the wilderness. We made RuneFest free. We genuinely, I don't know if you felt this as well, Mark, but I genuinely thought I was going to get punched in the face. Everybody was out there. We'd never done a RuneFest before. We thought everybody was angry. Everybody was angry on the forums. And I was just waiting, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And then people just came in, and there was hugs and love and talking about RuneScape. I was like putting faces to names, and it was just amazing. I was working the t-shirt counter. This is one of the joys of being a JMod at RuneFest as well. It's like I was just getting like extra large out here, small out here. And at the end of the day, when we're doing the teardown, while players were still there, because that's what we did. I was giving people penguins. Find the penguins. I was giving them from the walls and giving them as much merch as we could, and it just felt so brilliant. I love that. I remember a Billingsgate and one afterwards. The atmosphere when Mark was up on the stage doing his old kind of prowling the stage, announcing things. But I don't think players necessarily realise that a lot of the devs don't know what's being announced. So it was a wonderful thing. We were all like looking at each other, going, "Oh my God, we're making this now!" It sounded so good, but we didn't know we were making it. And so often in those days, the announcements were just as exciting for the JMods as it was for the players. But yeah, I tend to like putting sessions one after the other for myself because the sheer adrenaline just pulls you through. I love just running kind of from one to the next. I feel like, I'm trying to use a reference that isn't outdated and British, like kind of Annika Rice. Like you're running from one stage to the next, desperately kind of leapfrogging players who want your autograph, and I'm sorry, I've got to get to the next one. And so that's great fun as well. But
it's like a Glastonbury press tour, right? Like you're being rushed from side to side. It's really interesting. Like most RuneFests, I need a bouncer I need someone. If I need to get from one place to another place really, really quickly, I have to have a bouncer who can like clear a path for me, because there's so many people that want to talk to you, want an autograph or want something, and I am the kind of person that just wants to make sure everybody's happy as I'm going through. I don't want to say no to people, so I always ask for someone to help me get through. So they can be the bad guy. They can be the ones that go, no, we'll do this later, blah, 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 blah. Because otherwise it can just take you hours to get from one stage to another, and that's no good at all. I just had a memory pop into my head that I hadn't thought about for a while. There's this group of players that come to RuneFest every year, and they have a friend who always says they're going to come but never comes. And every year they get me to record a personal message for this guy who doesn't make it to RuneFest. And every year I forget that I have done it for the previous X amounts of years. Which is why I'm so surprised that it's popped into my head now. But they'll play me the messages that I sent them in the previous years, and they just get more and more abusive. Like, the last one I sent was just like, it was like calling his mum out and all sorts of things. Like, it was just fundamentally wrong how horrendous I was to this player. But it's all like you're kind of caught up in the emotion of everything, and they're like egging me on, going, really like give it to him. So it's just funny. Like, I won every year. I forget about it. So, and now I'm wondering, will that happen again next year? There's so many things, like, or this year or whatever. Whenever the world is ready for us to do events again, I wonder how many things that we've considered to be traditional in the past that we just won't do anymore. I was thinking about the mead horn, right? I mean, in the current circumstances, would you pass a glass of drink around to 1,500 people? No, you definitely would not.
It was very bad at the time.
Yeah, exactly, right? And we talk about rune flu. You talk about rune flu, and I mean, it's alcohol, right? It's not going to do... I don't know. I don't know the science of it, but, I just think to myself, am I going to be able to do that again, Like, that's such a big part of like the achievement parties and things like that, and the after show party, and running around with a giant hoard filled with mead and handing them out to whatever. I don't know if that's going to be part of the experience anymore, and that's weird. That's a weird. I mean,
there was somebody in the chat actually a while back. Actually, I just remember it because I was going to call it out at the time, but then you talked about the mead horn, and apparently you offered somebody a drink from the mead horn a few RuneFests ago, and they rejected it, and they've had bad RNG ever since. So there is a there is a reason to go with the mead. Always go with the mead.
By the luck horn.
Yes, the luck horn. Yeah.
No comment.
Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left, because I've been told by the production team that they get kicked out of the studio about 6 o'clock. So we've got about 10 minutes left. If anybody has any last questions, chuck them in the chat now. We'll try and see how many we can get through in the last sort of 10 minutes or so. Let me see what we've got. So we've talked about kind of RuneFest, sorry, not RuneFest, RuneScape a long time ago. Where do you think RuneFest will be in 20 years' time? We've got, sort of started from the bottom. Now we hear where we're going to be in 20 years' time. I can't believe I actually said that phrase on a live stream. But,
do you mean RuneFest or RuneFest or RuneScape?
RuneScape.
Right. Because I was going to say RuneFest will be in some old people's home somewhere, right? Because we'll all be retired by then. Where's the game going to be in 20 years' time? I mean, I'd like to think that... No, it's not. I know for sure that we're still going to be a rich, vibrant game that is surprising people, delighting people, and somewhere that people call home. Not just the players, but the developers, The way I talk about RuneScape, I apply to the company as well, so... I'm always delighted and amused by just the random stuff we've been sent in the post this year by the company. It feels like a weird little update for the players that they were surprised. I'm talking gibberish. I apologise.
That's right. That's right.
I think it's fair to say, right? we're never quite sure where we're going to be, right? We're never quite sure what we're going to be doing in a year's time. Dave and I joke about this kind of stuff all the time. Like, our bosses are always keen about what's your 5-year plan, what's your 10-year plan. They need to know that kind of stuff all the time. Look at Dave's little face; he's exhausted just at the mention of something like that. But as lead designers, you're asked that kind of thing all the time, and I've always thought I've got a rough idea of where I want to be in a year's time, but beyond that, RuneScape moves with the players, RuneScape moves with the times. I can't predict what the world's going to be doing in 5 years' time, so I can't predict what RuneScape's going to be doing, because RuneScape reflects the world so much. RuneScape reflects the developers or the tone or the company or whatever, and I don't know where those things are going to be. RuneScape is an expression, a creative expression held by hundreds, thousands, millions of people. And I can't predict where those people are going to be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, 20 years' time. So I can't tell you what the product's going to look like then. But I can, with 100% confidence, say that it will exist and that there will be an audience for it and there will be a group of people passionate to create it. And that's all I need. I don't need a bigger statement than that.
Mod Osborne, do you want to follow that?
I will try. Yeah, I think RuneScape is at its best, not when it changes, but when it grows. I think we in the past, we've changed so much that players don't recognise it anymore. But RuneScape is at its best when it evolves, and it is boundless, and it will. What I really hope is that we won't just be, as Mark put it, a retirement home for people who loved RuneScape 10 or 20 years from now. It's just some place that I can return back to and be comfy. I want it to be a story that keeps on getting told over 20 years. And that is massively important. And I think that that's what I love about RuneScape. It's so bustling. What the story is at any given time, what is powerful at any given time, the boss to take on any given time will shift and change, but there are some core elements that will always be true and always remain the same. I imagine that we will be more accessible. I would love to be on, Teslas, on toasters and on fridges, any accessible device that you want to play RuneScape on, yeah, let's have it. But there are a couple of things that I would love to have done that I haven't done in my time as lead designer. I want RuneScape to be social. I should not be in the same space as each other, just kind of, saying nice at each other's levels. That's great. But wouldn't it be fantastic if clans was, something I want to be in? If I wanted to play quests with each other, and there are very few boundaries to doing it. And also, would it be great if RuneScape was easy to play for a new player? Coming to it, there is so little friction. I can come in, and the world has been concentrically designed, or whatever you want to call it, that it is friendly, and I encounter the things that I should encounter as I explore as a new player. And I think we could do so much more there too. But those are just kind of, doing some topiary work, doing some trimming of the hedge that is RuneScape. The core is still, I could still see it being the same. The Wise Old Man is still important. Saradomin is still important. Lumbridge, 99's, party hats, all these things are still things that, are something safe and that I can return to. Yeah.
I can't add anything to that. That's very, very eloquently put, and I think very, I'm going to say emotively put as well. I think there's a lot of hearts in the chat then when you guys were talking through that kind of thing. I've got kind of one slightly more another player question. I've got one question that I'd like to end with today.
Sure.
So, what in game? What's been your favourite memory? So when you've hopped into the world of Gielinor, what has been your favourite memory over the time? And Mark, I'm going to come to you first because I know you've got your CC and it's been going for a very, very long time. Is there a particular moment that you remember?
I mean, my fondest memories are my really, really early days. When it was classic. I have dear friends that I've met through the game, and they were children when I first started speaking to them, and now they're grown-ups and at RuneFest. But, getting involved with the little... I love Emergent gameplay, right? I am absolutely that's my favorite thing about RuneScape, is that we make things and the players do things with the things we make in ways that we weren't expecting. That is emergent gameplay, where people come up with ideas with the tools that you've given them, even when those tools are not designed fit for purpose. And I talk about the challenges we had as developers when we made early content, and getting the engine to do things that it shouldn't do, and Andrew getting a bit angry with us because we'd done something crazy with the code. The players are the same. Like, this is incredibly controversial, right? But things like flower games and the gambling stuff that happened with flowers, that's emergent gameplay, right? We put tools in the game for players to create games with. The fact that they did some crazy, stupid gambling thing with it, and it caused all sorts of other issues related to all sorts of other stuff. The fact that it was done is kind of interesting. It's kind of fascinating. But in the early days, in Classic, those emergent gameplay experiences that I had, where I just stumbled into a group of people that were playing hide and seek, or playing rune golf, or having a wrestling match in the bottom of a Lumbridge basement, or pretending to be bears in the forest. Those are my favourite memories, because they're the first time it happened. The first time that when we first opened the friends chat, and I had like a chat channel, the first time that it filled up to maximum, and people are like messaging me saying, I can't get in your chat, what's going on? Those kind of things are incredibly powerful memories. And it keeps happening. Every time I log into RuneScape, something new happens to me. A player will talk about something new, or some way of twisting something that we've done and turned it into something else. And that is great, because it means the creativity I'm putting into the product comes back to me. That's when my favorite memories are born, when I get that creativity in return. It's fantastic.
Amazing. And Dave, how about you?
Mine's going to be a little bit controversial. I think I'm going to treat this almost as confessional. I didn't actually enjoy RuneScape when I first joined Jagex, and it's a multitude of reasons. I know it was. I hadn't played RuneScape when I got my interview.
Get out!
For the first. I know. So I was writing for this game for like 4 or 5 years. Sorry, I was doing editing work for the first 4 or 5 years. And I didn't get it. I didn't really understand the magic of RuneScape, or why it is so amazing. But there was a period of time, probably around about Dungeoneering, when Dungeoneering came out. And up to that point, whenever I was designing content, I was designing a different game, the game I wanted to play, not RuneScape. I was doing it wrong, basically. And then when Dungeoneering came out, I was very passionately invested, had helped with the guys in creating the world underneath the ground there. Wrote a lot of journals about Bilrak and Goroho and various other things. Was very invested in the story we created. And then we started kind of doing teams with other players. And I was kind of like, I want to welcome everybody to Dungeoneering. I'm going to go into game and I'm going to join a team with you. And then I found my Dungeoneering group. And we were coming up with abbreviations for all the things that we were doing there. I was kind of talking through some of the story of the bosses as we were going through as well. And because Dungeoneering was such a kind of microcosm of everything that's RuneScape, and I suddenly had all these prompts for training my skills. I can actually sit there and beast mode it, or whatever you want to call it. And I was, giving everybody. It was at the time where doing skilling in Dungeoneering wasn't a faux pas. I was sitting there and feeding everybody kind of materials and weapons and stuff like that. And I felt like complete as a unit. It was really social. We were all leveling together. It was a level playing field. I'd found my group. I joined a clan with them afterwards. And I just understood. I just got it. And from then on, I was off playing quests for enjoyment rather than writing quest helps. I was, doing as much kind of training as I could, as much social stuff as I could. And RuneScape just clicked. And I just loved it to bits. So Dungeoneering was like that kind of little firework that got me going with RuneScape. And ever since then, it's just everything has been done with that kind of love for it. At its core.
My final question was going to be, what to you makes RuneScape special? But I feel like you've kind of just answered those questions in the answers you just gave. Then I'm just going to chuck something in myself. Because...
anyway.
I'm going to chuck something in myself because as a host, I generally tend to be quite neutral and all that kind of stuff. But I quite wanted to just share this story because for me, this kind of encapsulates everything that I think makes RuneScape really special to me. Last year, this was just before the UK lockdown, so sort of I think February time. We had a message from somebody who was in the US, and it was a sister of somebody who played RuneScape pretty religiously for a really, really long time. Sort of we're talking 10, 15, getting on for 20 years. And they unfortunately had a terminal illness, and they weren't able to do, well, they kind of almost had like a wish list of things they wanted to get done sort of before kind of he passed away. And one of those things was to come to Jagex and to see kind of the design at work, and we were able to kind of facilitate a trip for him and his sister and his sister's boyfriend to kind of come to the studio. We did a tour, and just the look on his face as we were going around the studios, we did the tour. I'd kind of allocated about 15-20 minutes to go around the tour, and it ended up taking us about 2.5 hours because he was absolutely enthralled by all of the things that were on the wall, wanted to talk to everybody, and just was an absolute delight. And his family were absolutely brilliant as well. And he was able to sort of spend the day with us. He was able, I think, to try archaeology first before anybody else, I think, in the game. I think, Dave, you ran that session, so thank you very much for that. But he actually had an absolutely amazing day. We were able to give him sort of a god sword, send him one of the god swords that we have hanging up in the office back to him, and they sent a lovely message back to say this is just absolutely fantastic. And he deteriorated quite quickly after that, so that was almost the last time that he was able to get out of his house, and it was to be able to do something where he was able to come to Jagex and to kind of live out his dream, really. And that really, for me, because not just obviously the really amazing player, but also the fact that the entire studio came together to give him the day of his life before obviously he obviously sadly passed away earlier last year. And that for me just absolutely encapsulates everything that makes RuneScape special. It's the game itself, it's the players, it's the staff at Jagex, and it's just how everybody just knows that we're all in it together. It's an amazing community, and sorry if I'm getting a little bit choked up, but it was one of the things that I will always remember in my time at Jagex. And I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that, but otherwise I will say to Mark and to Dave, thank you very, very much for your time this evening. It's been amazing sort of talking to you guys, and maybe we can do another one of these in the future as we celebrate the 20 years that RuneScape has been around. I would love to kind of welcome you guys to join us for the rest of the celebrations. It's going to be an amazing year, and we can't wait to see, well, we know what's coming, but we can't wait for you to see what's coming as well. So thank you very much, Mark.
Cheers, mate.
And thank you very much to Dave.
It's lovely talking to you again.
I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, have a great time and enjoy the 20th birthday celebrations. We'll be around, we'll be back next week, and we'll be back on Tuesday and Wednesday. So make sure you tune in for what we have in store, because it's going to be a lot of fun. See you later, guys. Have a great evening.
Bye.